squirrely Christmas, the squirreliest one of all. With mistletoe and maybe some snow and good old Santa Claus. Ho, 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 ho.
Bah! Humbug!
Welcome to the archive. And there's no getting around the issue. It's Christmas time again. Oh well, at least I'm better prepared this year than I was last year. We got red hot stacks of red hot holiday wax coming down the track straight into your town. So stay cool, kitty cats, in spite of the fact that it's only 15 degrees outside, so it really shouldn't be too hard to stay cool. I'm not a disc jockey, you know that. Well, let's just dive right in. Our first hot holiday hit is this one, Snoopy's Christmas, from Peter Pan Records. Now, I got this as a kid back in the early 90s, and I was a bit skeptical at the time. I mean, I'd seen the Peanuts specials, and I knew that Snoopy kind of just whined. So I was, again, just a bit skeptical about how this would translate to an album format, and my fears weren't unfounded at all.
Oh boy, after that song, I know they won't forget to invite their very own favorite little old neighborhood hound dog, me.
This album is very much your classic Peter Pan Records junk. It's a nice stew of bad covers and half-assed originals and a very awkward, stilted storyline. I use the term very loosely. Now, the title Snoopy's Christmas does not actually refer to the album as a whole, which I think kind of threw a few people off, like me. It actually refers to a, unsurprisingly, rather poor cover of the 1967 hit by the Royal Guardsmen.
Christmas bells, those Christmas bells, ring up from the land.
Christmas bells, those Christmas bells, ring across the land, asking peace for all the world and goodwill to man.
And as this is a cheap knockoff record, none of the actual Peanuts gang actually appears on here. Imagine that. Instead, you get these very lame attempts at trying to bypass Charles Schulz's copyright. For example, instead of Snoopy, you get Sloopy. Isn't that a girl's name?
Sloop it and your head down, let it hang down on me.
And instead of Charlie Brown, you get Harley. Get it? Harley, Charlie. Instead of Lucy, you get Susie. And lamest of all, instead of Schroeder, you get Broder.
Harley, something's missing here. There is? What? The mistletoe. Where's the mistletoe?
Susie, where's Sloopy?
I don't know.
Broder, did you see him?
Who, Snoopy?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's out there in the backyard. You can see him from the window.
Now, in spite of the fact that my copy of this tape carries a 1990 date, I'm pretty sure all the recordings, the actual recordings, date to about 1975. Largely because just about everything on here sounds like it came from an episode of Kojak.
Call the cops, call the cops, call the army and the navy and the marines, call them all. And somebody stole the mistletoe, somebody stole the mistletoe. Who stole the mistletoe?
The nose.
This album was so traumatic to me as a kid that I managed to forget about it every time we had a garage sale. And indeed, it's so traumatic to me now that I'm just going to go ahead and shift gears here. Now, if you've watched Archive long enough, you know that we kind of have this unintentional fixation on singing rodents. I mean, in the past, we've had chipmunks, and we've had chipmunks that, for legal reasons, mutated into hamsters. And now we've got squirrels.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, we're gonna have a squirrely Christmas, the squirreliest one of all, with mistletoe and maybe some snow and good old Santa Claus. Ho, 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 ho.
Way back in 1959, the very first Alvin and the Chipmunks knockoff came out, and they were known as the Nutty Squirrels. And freakishly enough, their debut single sailed right into the top 20. And you've pretty much heard the entire single. Now, the Nutty Squirrels carried on for a while, putting out a bunch of singles and albums. This lasted for about another 5 years, and it was met, unsurprisingly, without success. Now, fast forward to 1976, and country singer Ronnie Milsaps' less successful brother, Bob, just kidding, no relation, decided that for some reason he was going to resurrect the Nutty Squirrels. For legal reasons, he opted to only use their individual names, Shirley and Squirrely. Now, old Bob put out what actually became a moderate country hit. It made the top 30, and it was cashing in on the then ongoing CB radio fad. You know, rubber ducky, we got ourselves a convoy.
Hey, Shirley, this is Squirrely. You got your ears on. Come on. Shirley, I heard you talking to that Southside bushy tail, and you sound like a girl I'd like to know real well.
As it was getting to be fourth quarter time, if you get my drift, the powers that be decided that a holiday album would only be natural. The result? Christmas with Shirley and Squirrely, and Melvin too. You gotta love it when there's an attic kid. Now, speaking of Melvin, he seems to have a pretty bad case of Porky Pig by way of Rich Little syndrome. Over the course of this album's first and, in my opinion, best cut, we're introduced to not only the main squirrels, but we're also introduced to a few stereotypes as well. But at least they're fun ones.
Pardon me, ma'am. Do you believe in the spirit of Christmas and Old Saint Nick? Sure enough, baby. Listen, that spirit of Christmas is all right. But if some jive turkey in a red suit come down my chimney at 4 o'clock in the morning, he better be Santa Claus, or I'll be on him like a rat's nest on a gnat's knuckle. Even the jungle squirrels have the Christmas spirit.
Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. And I'd like to say that the Christmas spirit is very much alive. Right, Pronto?
Right, Kimosabe.
The spirit is there for each of us.
And we also get a taste of some of the problems that would befall the happy chipmunks/hamsters nearly a decade later.
Hey, here comes a chipmunk. Hi, has anybody here seen Calvin? Nobody here but us squirrels. Uh-oh, I must be on the wrong record.
Calvin! Seriously, though. Over the course of this surprisingly well-made, well-mastered, well-manufactured album, we get the usual suspects in terms of overdone Christmas tunes like Let It Snow, Jingle Bells, and We Wish You a Merry Christmas. And it also includes my all-time least favorite Christmas tune, The 12 Days of Christmas, which, as we all know, is the 99 bottles of beer on the wall of Christmas tunes. But in this album's favor, they keep it mercifully brief, and better yet, Melvin actually calls the song out on just how dumb it is.
And a partridge in a pear tree. Wait a minute. Just a minute. What's the matter, Melvin? This is a silly song. Well, how would you do it? On the 11th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a skateboard and a bicycle, a chemistry set, a CB radio, and a $6 million squirrel. Oh, Melvin, that's dumb. Here's the way the song goes, you rummy. On Yeah, boy, I bet your house was a mess.
And last, but probably least, we get a haunted house track.
Wait, I'll get my wife.
What's that noise?
It's my teeth chattering. Did you see the way that guy looked?
Hush, Melvin. People can't help how they look.
If his teeth are chattering, he throws his voice extremely well. Or his teeth are in absolutely the wrong place. Anyway, in 1981, Shirley, Squirrely, and Melvin put out what proved to be their final album. And unsurprisingly, it sank without a trace, just like their last one. Now, nobody knows exactly what became of these squirrels, but the going theory is that some dirt-poor Appalachian family trapped and sadly ate them sometime in the mid-'80s. So, on that happy note, let's take our commercial now.
Christmas 1971. And to add a bit of joy to your holiday season, Goodyear presents The Joyous Songs of Christmas. Starring Barbara Streisand, Andy Williams, Tony Bennett, Lena Horne, Danny Kaye, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, Percy Faith, Johnny Mathis, Carol Burnett, Ray Conniff, Jim Neighbors, the Lennon Sisters, Bobby Sherman, the Philadelphia Orchestra, Eugene Ormandy conducting. 14 artists, 14 selections to add to the joy of your Christmas. Only $1 at Goodyear service stores and most Goodyear dealers.
Since we're on the subject of singing rodents, why don't we take a look at this one next? From 1978, this is Santa Claus's Christmas Party, recorded live. Sure. This very poorly recorded and mastered album is your one-stop shop for your rodent fetish. I mean, it's got hamsters, it's got squirrels, and it's got chipmunks. But not just any chipmunks, holy chipmunks, as in MONKS chipmunks, straight from the monastery. Now, of the 4 rodent-centric cuts on here, they seem to be just circa early 60s Christmas records played back fast, with a couple of new overdubs tacked on. And one of the cuts doesn't even do that, it's just some old record played fast. Now, just for jollies, let's hear the kids on this album instantly hit very awkward puberty.
I heard one of them say Santa Claus is already in town.
Really? It won't be long now, all right. Yeah.
Anyway, the whole rodent thing on this album is really just the tip of the iceberg with this baby. Now, in spite of the implications of the album's title, this is not a concept album about a party that Santa Claus is throwing, but instead is a high-concept album about just your garden variety family and friends sort of holiday party. And on this record, they play some records. Not sure how that works.
Really, and while we're waiting, let's play Frosty Snowman.
Okay, why not?
Frosty the Snowman was a jolly happy soul.
They're greeted by some carolers who seem to have a full electric band in tow, somehow.
Heedless of the wind and weather, fa la 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 la.
and are greeted by a Santa Claus.
I've got presents for everyone. Ho, ho, ho. Let's see what I have in my bag here. I've got shoe skates for Cindy.
For me?
Yes, indeed. Here are your shoe skates, Cindy. I've got a football for Mike.
A football? Wow!
Now, it's stressed on the back cover notes of this album, it doesn't really matter if you can read it, that this was recorded live and that mistakes were left in to make it more real. How funny. Now, if any of that were actually true, I wouldn't have so much a problem with, like, the ever-present group of kids on this album tripping over themselves occasionally.
I carried his mother to Bethlehem town. I said the donkey shaggy and brown.
But not only is this album not live in any sense of the word, but they don't even make any attempt to at least attempt seamlessness. And indeed, this album is home to some of the most atrocious editing that I have ever heard. For example, some of the songs on here just cut off abruptly.
Oh boy, we can build a snowman. Yeah, really. And while we're waiting, let's play Frosty Sweet and Heavenly.
Now, I've never had to write the word sick on any of my track listings before, but I had to here because I didn't want to mistake such tunes as Away in the Manger, or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or Upon the Rooftop for original tunes. But seriously, though, there is actually a saving grace to this album, and it actually lies in the bad sonic craftwork on here. It works to absolutely hilarious effect when, say, the electric carolers leave. It sounds like the kids just slam the door right in their faces.
Thanks for coming back.
We enjoyed it. See you next year.
And later in the album, it sounds like they've sent poor demented old soul Santa to go rot in the basement.
Well, I'll see you. Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas. Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas. Ho, 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 ho. Ho, 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 ho. Ho, 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 ho.
What is it with this show and disco albums? This is probably the most famous of the late 70s disco craze cash-in records, certainly of the disco Christmas records. I don't know who this Disco Knoll guy is, but he's really boring. Seriously, though, I'm only going to touch on this one briefly, largely because it's never actually fallen out of print. I mean, if you go on Amazon nowadays and look up the album Christmas Disco or anything by the Mistletoe Disco Band, you have found yourself some permutation of this album. Another notable thing about this album is that it came with some rather scant written instructions from the Arthur Murray chain of dance schools on how to do the hustle. There you go. Try and figure that one out. Anyway, the only real notable thing about the music on here has got to be the rendition of The Little Drummer Boy, because if it weren't for the rumpa-pum-pums on here, you'd never know it was that song. Somebody paid $3.97 for this. Sucker. Anyway, last album.
Yay!
Very funny. I consider myself to be a pretty staunch advocate of new original Christmas music. I mean, really, how many more renditions of, say, Winter Wonderland can this world take at this point? And besides, new traditions have to start somewhere. And so with that last album, and it's actually the same one as on the box, from 1979, this is Christmas Disco Party. And unlike a lot of those other Christmas disco cash-in records, this one's actually about half made up of new original tunes, at least new back in 1979. Unfortunately, it plays out as an almost literal textbook on how not to write Christmas tunes. Because, nothing says instant classic like All I Want for Christmas is a Disco Beat.
Just play that disco music on the radio, and there's no place that I'd rather be. Oh, all I want for Christmas is a disco beat. You can't compete with a disco beat. To brighten up your spirits, just pick up your beat. Everybody's moving to the disco beat.
Or how about that touching and not at all awkward or ever so slightly verbose duet, What I Want for Christmas is Just to Have You Here. Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
What I want for Christmas is not to be alone.
What I want for Christmas is for you to come home.
Indeed, most of the original tune titles on here seem to just be slight variations on existing ones. I mean, you've got Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree with Me, you've got Santa Claus's Disco into Town, which, believe me, is nowhere as funny as it sounds, and you've got Dancin' in a Winter Wonderland.
And we're dancing in a winter wonderland of love. Dancing in a winter wonderland of love. When you get your body in motion, the music is a magic love potion. And we're dancing in a...
But the real eye roller on here is the blatant and not to mention failed attempt at a hit single entitled We're Gonna Have a Disco Christmas Party.
Our favorite songs are playing on the radio. Come and warm yourself by the fire. Never mind the falling snow. Chance, you can shine, 'cause you're so fine, so get up and dance.
Well, gang, I hate to cut our little disco Christmas party short, but I gotta get going. I'm running late. One of the websites that Archive affiliates with is having its office Christmas party tonight, and I promised I'd be there, so it's gonna suck. I just had a song idea. Good thing I've got my guitar and an amplifier and a cheesy phaser effect handy. Let's give this a shot here, huh? We're gonna have a dismal Christmas party. Watch Jimmy prance, prance, prance. We're gonna have a dismal Christmas party. Get out before Jimmy takes off his pants. You can't hide from Jimmy's hide when he takes off his pants. Yeah, I never said it was a good idea. One chord, ladies and gentlemen.